there's a lot of folks out there that have done it. They've already done this, you know, and that's truly the answer, is to get yourself in the room with these other folks that have managed to figure it out.
Hey, Duane, welcome to the show.
Hey, what's happening? It's glad to be here, man.
Yeah, I'm excited too. Yeah, before we get into the weeds of the topic for today, I'm always curious, how did you get into construction and all this madness that we're all in?
Yeah, construction, it definitely can lead you down maybe an unknown path, but maybe one of the more typical scenarios. I mean, it was something I was involved in. I had some friends, even going all the way back into high school, had a few friends that had some dads in the business of GCs and painters and cabinet people. And so, summer jobs that turned into a little bit more full-time jobs. And then suddenly the full-time jobs started telling a 18, 19-year-old that, wow, there's some money to be made here. So, transformed into being a subcontractor, and then let's try more hats. Let's open my own business, and then let's not just do everything in the business but focus on running the business. So kind of the whole gamut, all the way from the guy stacking lumber all the way through to somebody now that's a little bit removed from my day-to-day business, kind of focusing a little bit on the visionary role. But it's been fun.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
a literal started from the bottom kind of a thing, scrapping lots and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious, how old were you when you first said, okay, I'm going to start my own business, and kind of made that transition?
I think it really was early to mid 20s, because I had been as I said, I had been working for some folks in the family, plus a few other general contractors for a while. Then started a business as a subcontractor at first, doing various things all around construction. Um, and then I would say it was around 1997, when I moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and started the business that I'm in now with my business partner Roger Ketchum. That's when we opened up pretty much a full blown general contracting, custom home remodeling company.
Yeah, that's awesome. So when you guys made that move, did you focus on certain types of projects, or was it just like, we gotta pick up anything we can get?
Yeah, well, when you start the business, it's pick up pretty much anything you can get. There was a focus then on a lot of higher end, large remodel projects. We found a niche in the Charlotte area to where that was definitely a demand. And we had a pretty strong, both of us had a pretty strong background in it. Uh, but one of the things I think that gravitated to us is that we had worked for a few companies prior, and everybody's heard it. The just the nightmares that people have especially in remodeling, because there's people living in the home a lot of times. And we were like, man, it doesn't have to be like that. I mean, we've done enough of these that if you do a few of the right things, you plan, you stage things right, we can pull this off. And what was cool was we not only pulled it off, but within the first year or so started really getting some rave reviews from clients, and having fun with it, like I said. And that's really what kind of started it for us.
That's cool. Yeah. And I'm always curious, with people that kick off their own businesses, like if you think about the first like 3, 5 years or so, what do you think were the biggest like hurdles, or just like stumbling blocks where you're like, man, if I could have, somebody would have told me about that, we could have shortcutted the process a little bit.
It's funny. We actually, on my podcast, one of the recent guests that we had talk, and that'll be out in several weeks, but talks about the business life cycle, that all companies go through, no matter what industry you're in. And I look back at that and I'm thinking, that early phase is really that, even before adolescent, infancy stage. It's frankly, you're throwing shit against the wall. You're trying everything. You've got to be sales guy, you've got to get the leads, you've got to estimate it. And at the time we were even doing hands-on work, so I mean, we were doing some framing and some trim work. So I think the challenge was, there's in the very, very early days, there's a lot of excitement because you're doing it yourself, you're doing it all yourself. um, Whether it's good or bad. There's successes, there's failures, but there's just such a level of excitement about it. But it doesn't take long before that excitement turns into something that becomes all consuming. And I think the challenges in the early days were really around what should we be doing. And I was fortunate. I have a business partner, Roger, and we've had a relationship for over 20 years, and it's been great, I think, because we were always able to bounce some things off of each other. But that was the challenge, I think, that was probably the biggest for us, and probably the thing that ultimately propelled us as well, was that we identified pretty early what we should be doing and started to make some moves to do that. We realized quickly that we can't do it all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. And so maybe paint the picture of what today looks like what kinds of projects you're working on, and then talk a little bit more about your role. You said you're more in the visionary kind of seat now.
Yeah, I guess, kind of fast forwarding, I would say once we got maybe into year 4 or 5, this is back in the early 2000s, starting to do some good revenue, starting to do nice projects, building a bit of a team, had brought in some other carpenters, lead carpenters, and some folks that were even doing some site management. I started to realize that I needed to focus more on the sales end of stuff, even got into a little bit of design myself. Roger focused a little bit more on the production side. I would say as we started moving towards 2007, 8, just before the Great Recession.
It was so great, right?
It was great. Yeah, nothing about it. Let's not reproduce those days.
Man.
But yeah, I mean, in some cases, the writing was on the wall too. I think if all of us look back at it, we probably could have seen some of that coming. But for us, we hunkered down. We got hurt just like everybody else. But I mean, we scrapped and we stayed in business. But in a way, it was a little transformative for us because we also started to realize that was an opportunity for us to really focus on the types of projects, and even more than that, maybe the types of clients that we want to work with. um, so coming out of that, getting into around 2010, 2012, that's where there was even more of a shift. I started to get myself involved with other entrepreneur groups, dabbled around in some of the different groups that are offered by, whether it's NAHB, NARI, things like that. um, we've heard the phrase, the working on the business instead of in the business, but I was really taking that to heart. It was like, okay, we've got a solid 10 years or so under our belt. What in the world are we doing with this thing for the next 10 to 15 years? And that's, like I said, when I really started to look from the outside in and realize that there's a lot of things that I wanted to put into the company. We needed systems and we needed processes, and ultimately, what could we do to get this company to a point where it could run without us? And that didn't mean that we wanted to stop working by any means,
Sure.
but I think we both knew that if we could get this business to the point where it could run without us having to be so involved in it, that would be the ultimate outcome. Because it would give us flexibility, um, opportunity to maybe set it up for sale or pass it on to someone else. So that was the focus. 2014, 15. And then around 2016, I actually got approached by a company called Alair Homes, which is a franchise model. And that, kind of resonated with me because of all the things that I was looking at. I came across Alair and realized that this is a pretty good opportunity because they were kind of putting everything into one package. So anyway, they provide a lot of back end services and things like that. But so once we did that, we got to a position where we started to embrace all sorts of things. We started to embrace, I'm not sure if you're familiar with EOS, the Entrepreneur
Mhm.
Operating System. Yep. And
Yeah, traction.
things like traction. It really started getting to that point where we were working on all of those different parts and pieces so that we could identify the various roles within the company. Um, the people that were going to be needed to take over certain things, really delegating a lot of the things that we were doing. And part of that opportunity that I had with Alair was also allowed me to become a regional partner for them, which in a way is sort of like a business coach type of role. I help to recruit other builders and models remodelers that might be interested in what we're doing at Alair, and then I support their ongoing operations. So for us, it was an opportunity for me to, really. I was realizing around 2016 or 17 that that's where my focus was. My personally my interest in remodeling and building stuff was starting to wane because I've done so much of it, but my passion was really around the business side, helping what could I do to get involved, not only from my own business, but I mean other businesses, um, and help folks really get their head around getting the most out of their business.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, it allowed Roger to focus a little bit more on running the day to day of our office. And, in a way, I guess that's kind of the story of where we were, where we are today. And I've kind of put myself almost in like that visionary role for our office in Charlotte. I've got a great team under me. Roger is primarily involved with the day to day. I try to steer some of maybe the bigger decisions and things like recruiting as well. I mean, we're always looking for great people and great trades and great trade partners to work with. So that's where my focus has shifted, and yeah, that's where we are today.
Yeah, yeah, that's super cool. And I feel like you're right. A lot of times you get going, you just kind of put one foot in front of the other, and then you make enough progress where you can kind of zoom out a little and go, what are we trying to do here? And you make those evolutions. I feel like a lot of people get stuck in that journey though, and they don't actually get to a spot where you're at now, or they get to 55, 60, and they're going, uh-oh, like what am I going to do with this business? Can I even sell it? Do I have a family member I can just transition it to? But there isn't like a lot of forethought, and then you're kind of like the clock starts ticking. So I'm curious, from now that you've kind of been in this more advisory role, and you've seen some other things, and you've probably talked to a lot of people in the industry, where do you think most people get stuck?
I would think, and again, this is looking at it from having my own business, looking at other businesses. As you know, we do the Builder Nuggets podcast, and a lot of the focus that we do there is on building freedom. How do you build freedom through your business? And some of the assessments that Dave Young, my co-host, and I do on through Builder Nuggets, and is it's interesting when you talk to folks. One of the things we try to do is we try to get them to look forward, like really, where are you going to be? Where do you want to be in 5 years, 10 years? And it's amazing to me how big of a struggle that can be for folks, and they almost default back to, and how many times have you heard it? I don't have time for that.
Yeah.
It's really, really hard. I've found for a lot of these builders and remodelers to think about, well, well, and they might come up with I want to, I want to sail a yacht around the world, but to really get them to actually envision themselves, like what do you want to do? What are you best at doing? And I think one of the reasons might be is I don't know that enough people actually go through a formal exercise, whether it's through EOS or there's other platforms out there you can go through, but to really determine your highest and best use, what should you be doing? Where should you be spending your time? I'm sure folks have heard things like think about $500 an hour work, $1,000 an hour work. I mean, as the business owner, that's the way you really should be thinking. Your time is very valuable. It's a very limited amount of it. And what do you have to do to get yourself to where you are actually at your highest and best? And then not just yourself, but everybody around you. If you can start to put all those different team members you have, getting them into a position where they are functioning, doing the things that they love to do and they're great at, all of this becomes a lot easier.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, the vision part is just, if you don't know where you're going, like how are you going to get there, right? Like
Yeah.
this, any road will do, or whatever the saying is. But yeah, what you said there at the end really resonated with me personally, is like getting the right people in some of those spots. But you have to do the vision part first, like you said, like where do I want to be spending my time, and where am I adding the most value? And then what are the areas that aren't that, can you put somebody else in those seats? And I feel like sometimes that's a little scary, because you may have to add some overhead, or you've kind of put yourself in a spot where you're going, the business works now, like profitability wise or income wise for yourself or whatever it is. But if I put in this role, I'm kind of trusting that I will then use my time to push the business forward and um, yeah, justify doing that. So I don't know. Did you have any of those moments like as you guys were moving along?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of those moments, and I think one of the big things for me was actually I had joined a group called Vistage back in around 2014, 15, and it's an entrepreneur group. And I think the one benefit it had for me was it pulled me out of the industry a little bit. I had always been so focused in the industry, and I think a lot of us default back to, oh well, construction. It's not like construction. I don't think you understand how difficult construction. And that's kind of an excuse because it's business at the end of the day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this, when I was with that Vistage group, it opened my eyes to some of these other companies. I mean, and they ranged from, I think we had like $1 million a year graphics design company all the way up to a $200 million a year commercial electrical contractor, and all sorts of stuff in between. But the amazing thing to me was that the problems were basically the same. They were around people, they were around struggles, they were around people hitting the ceiling. Um, and I think that was eye opening for me because I realized that we are in this industry, we are passionate about what we do. I mean, we're tradesmen, we're skilled tradesmen, craftsmen, artisans to some degree. And we default back to, I think we feel like we've got to have our hands on everything. We've just got to touch it. We've got to see it. We've got to make sure it's just right. And that holds us back, I think, at times. And that's a big step for a lot of people, is to make that move to say, okay, I'm gonna, whether it's invest in something or bring on somebody else in a new role. How am I going to do that? Um, that's just more stuff that I'm going to have to do. And the big thing for me was the collaboration factor, realizing that there's a lot of folks out there that have done it. They've already done this. And that's truly the answer, is to get yourself in the room with these other folks that have managed to figure it out. And when you talk to them, you'll realize that they didn't just magically come up with it. They've been collaborating with other successful people. Um, and that's the key, whether it's just things like this. I mean, what you're doing with Builder Funnel, it's, you get a community of people that are really trying to push things forward. There's a lot out there to learn, and stop struggling. Stop taking so much time trying to figure it all out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great advice. As soon as you start talking to some people that are 1, 2, 3 steps ahead, you just quickly go, oh, like there is a path, there is a way. And I can learn that way actually a lot quicker and not through just figuring it out and grinding your way through it. So
Absolutely.
yeah. So I want to dig into a little bit around like the idea of exiting or selling, or even, kind of something like you did where, sold but then you're still a part of it. And I don't know how all the details shook out, but that general concept, I think, because I would imagine that in your situation, like somebody like Alair, they're looking for people that are at certain stages, or they're looking for certain, types of companies. Like, what are the types of things that somebody has to be putting in place to look attractive, to a buyer or somebody, in that, on the other side?
It's interesting because we actually have just recorded with did a podcast with David Lutberger just
Oh
actually just a
yeah.
few days a few days ago this week. And that's something he's tremendously passionate about.
Oh
And
yeah.
I love the line when he sits out there, when he says, you have to think about it, ask yourself your question: would you buy your company? Would you buy it today as it is, and how much would you pay for it? And that's a real good first step for all of us. Just a little bit of a check to say, is that what I would want? Would I want to step into that? Am I actually buying a business, or am I just buying a job?
Yeah.
um and it's those things. I think that the big thing really is, again, thinking about, can this business run without you? Can it sustain itself? Can it survive? And I think that's a good way at the beginning to start thinking about, what are the things that I have to put in place? What are all the key between positions and roles? But I think where a lot of people fall short is that they think about exiting their business And the vast majority of people never put a plan in place. And if they do put a plan in place, they're scrambling at the very end when actually the company might be getting smaller. Revenues might start to be waning year by year, and that's the wrong time to put an exit strategy together. You really, from day one, when you go into business, should be thinking about the end in mind. And that's what we talked about before, that vision part.
Hmm.
Um, and I realize, when you start, you're not going to have the resources, the time, and all that to put an actual exit strategy and plan right in place, but you can work towards it. And I think it is that ability to start thinking about what do I need? Where is this company going to be in 5 years, in 10 years? Is it just me running it? If it's a very small company, if it's a team of 5 or 10 or more, you really need to define the roles in the company, all the different tasks that have to be done, the responsibilities, um, the processes. We hear that over and over again. You've got to have repeatable processes so that it's inevitable over the lifespan of a company. Once you start building a team, that people are going to come in and people are going to go out. And I think if you're left as the owner, as the person that has to constantly fill every gap, you're going to be in that endless loop, of burnout and frustration. You should have enough systems, training, things like that in place to where when people come in, they can kind of pick the ball up, and you can kind of give them a little bit of an overview, but they can dive into it to something that's systematized, and just run with it. So, I mean, I think that's probably key is processes.
Yeah.
I don't know that enough people really take the time to have defined systems and processes. So.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's good advice. Yeah, and Dave and I are part of a group together too, and I love that question you mentioned because that could be a real gut check pretty quickly, in thinking about would you buy
It
your own business?
Yeah, a lot of people will pause really quick,
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
But I like your comments around like the processes, and because that at the end of the day you can plug and play, and obviously the goal is to build a team that is going to be there. But to your point, like some people will go and you'll bring in new people. I'm curious if you have recommendations around like which which of those kind of roles to try to fill first, whether it's like operation side or like marketing and sales or like on the financial side. um yeah, and if someone were like maybe 3 to 5 years into their journey and they're going, okay, I've been doing a lot of everything, like what should I plug first?
I think one of the first things you should do is whether it's through something like EOS, any of the other, even if it's a Colby assessment. I mean, there's lots of different things out there, but I think it is hugely important, especially as the business owner, to understand what you're good at and what you're not good at. And it's kind of twofold there because, if you're good at something and you love doing it, well, then you should be working, all your effort should be poured into how can I spend my time doing that?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's a bunch of stuff that you're not good at it and you struggle with it, you don't like it. And I would dare to say most of our listeners, that would probably be something like marketing, or designing websites. I mean, generally builders, they don't want to do that. They don't understand it. They don't like it. And if they're stumbling and fumbling through it, well, find a solution for it. So I think that's one of the first things I would do is try to figure out yourself where you need to be, what you should be focused on, and then start looking at the other key parts of the business as well to say, okay, if I've got a few other key teammates, what are same thing with them? What's their highest and best use? What should they be doing? And then suddenly what happens is you develop some gaps. You start to say, hey, wait a minute. We're pretty strong on operations. We're pretty strong on the sales end. We are just a train wreck when it comes to marketing. Well, there's your answer. Then
Yeah.
fix that, put some effort into finding somebody that's really good at it, that loves to do it. And they're going to take that off your plate. But if you default back to going in the weeds and just trying to fumble your way through figuring that out, it's layers of frustration.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I like that. Figuring out where you're strong and then plugging those other holes. And even where you're strong, you can always fill that later. And I think where you're headed with all this is like getting yourself out of all the seats, but you might as well be in the seat that you're really strong in and good at for as long as you can.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's part of business. When you start the business, you're going to be in every seat. You're going to be wearing all the hats, and then you'll build your team, and you'll start to get to the point where you end up with, well, sometimes you fumble over each other. You'll have two asses in one seat, and um, it's all part of it. But I think when you really get a focus on the highest and best use has been something that myself and other builders remodelers we work with it's been pretty transformative because and we've all heard it, I mean, if you're doing what you love, you're going to be in a great place, but it can be really hard to identify what that is, because it's real easy to just fall back to, well, this has to be done, that's got to be done, I got to run out and get that permit, it's just, and that just eats your time. But once you flip that switch mentally and realize that, man, I need to spend my time, my goal should be getting myself to do the things that I love to do. What's it going to take to do that? Does that mean I need a certain person? Does that mean I need to outsource something? That's a big change when somebody goes through that exercise.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I feel like if I mean, a lot of us, like you said, got started as craftsmen of the thing, whatever it is. And so, but maybe you're not a marketer, not a salesperson, and that's the part that's uncomfortable. And it's like, oh, good, I sold something. Like now I can go do the thing that I want to do. So,
Yeah.
if you can find somebody that can sell, then you can, deliver. Or
Yeah.
the other way, if you're like, hey, I'm strong at sales and getting out of operations, once, if you can just put operations to the side, then you can just go, all right, I'm just pushing the company forward. But I find like the revenue side and the ops side, like when you're doing both, that's just a tough spot. And so if you can plug one or the other and just be able to hone in on the other side and like make it the best and really good, then that is freeing.
Yeah, I mean, a perfect example is my business partner, Roger Ketchum. I mean, it was when we started to go through some of these transitions, I would say maybe five years ago or so. Yeah, he started to move out of a kind of a production role and into what I had primarily been doing for years, was more of the sales role. And he was comfortable with it. And he's gone through different types of, sales training and stuff like that. So that wasn't really the issue. But what the issue was he was still kind of caught on the production side. And he would go out and try to focus on business development and doing some sales, and then he'd get pulled back into production, and then come out and take a look at this job site. The project managers, everybody was pulling it, and
Yeah.
so we made a concerted effort to say, okay, well, what do we have to do to get Roger in his box, so to speak, is what we call this. You know what?
Yep.
Roger really wants to focus. We want to get him focused on business development. We want him to be able to spend the vast majority of his time doing that, so that he can do it well. That he
Yeah.
can have those really great conversations with people on the front end. He can follow up well. He can, impress the clients when he's going out there with presentations. And you can't do that if, on the way to your sales presentation, you're getting called by your carpenters, and you got to swing off and pick up some stuff at the lumber yard. You know what I mean? That whole, if you're dabbling in all those different things, you're not a benefit to yourself or anybody else. You're just working at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that last example you said of like you're driving to a sales opportunity and then you get a call, and whether you have to deviate and go pick something up or not, now you're mentally in a fire, and then you have to go and be excited about selling what you're delivering. And I feel like your confidence level goes down, like your just
Yeah.
ability to sell. And so I found breaking those apart, like you got somebody that manages the whirlwind and then somebody that's like, I'm selling this, and we're going to do a good job. There's always problems and things to solve. So
Yeah.
I think that was a fantastic example there, because I'm sure that happens all the time.
You
Um,
hear it all the time. Yeah,
yeah.
all the time.
um,
It's,
but
well, in the builder nuggets world, that's the chaos model we talk about. I mean, people trying to scale chaos. It's just, it's it's painful.
Yeah, yeah. It's like the guy doing three, and he's like, if I could just double, all my problems would be gone. It's like, no, you're just gonna double all your problems.
You're going to double your
So,
problems. Exactly.
uh, Duane, well, we wrap up with a few more questions, but before I get to those, how can people connect with you or learn more about what you guys got going on, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, connect with me. One of the easiest ways is you can find me right on LinkedIn, Duane Johns. Buildernuggets.com is a great way to connect with me as well. It's got my bio on there. It's linked to our shows and stuff like that. And a lot of that will feed back to my business side as well, AlairHomesCharlotte.com. So
Right on. Cool. And we'll put those in the show notes for everybody too. Duane, we always end with the fast five. So I'll hit you with 5 rapid fire questions and just say whatever comes to mind. First one, favorite business book and why?
favorite business book, I'm going to just go with E-Myth. It's simple. It's
Mhm.
something that's out there. But for me, it was a big deal because it was the key takeaway. Um, I got myself out of the technician mindset. That was huge for me.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. All right, who is the most inspirational person in your life?
Who is the most inspirational person in my life? I'm gonna go with my wife. She also has her own business. She grounds me. She motivates me. She challenges me all the time. Um, and she's my biggest fan and my biggest critic.
That's awesome. That
Yeah.
yeah, she sounds pretty awesome. Then you need all those things. So
And we've been married now for 28 years, so there's something must work there.
awesome, awesome. Yeah. All right. If you could have one superpower, what would that be?
One superpower. Oh, let's see. I don't know. I guess maybe a superpower would be time travel.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's a good
I'm
one.
just going to leave it there.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. We could talk another hour on why, but
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You can fill in the blanks for why.
All right. Describe yourself in 3 words.
In 3 words, um, I would say logical, sometimes to a flaw. Um, funny because I try not to take myself or anything that I'm doing too seriously. Um, and I would say passionate.
Right on. All right. Final question. If you could leave our listeners with one piece of advice, what would that be?
Get yourself get yourself in a room of people that are smarter than you. I mean, I'm sure folks have heard that before, but I think you underestimate the power and do it on a consistent basis. Don't do it once a year or find something, a community, a group, um, and so that you are collaborating with some really smart, like-minded people on a very regular basis.
Great advice. Well, Duane, thanks so much for spending some time with me today.
Spencer, man, it's been fun, and let's make this a regular thing.
Yeah, sounds good. All right. Thanks so much.
All right, man, we'll see you.